In a moment when Europe is reassessing its security priorities, Germany finds itself at a historic crossroads. A new model for military service, approved after an intense and closely watched parliamentary vote, has set off nationwide debate, mass student protests, and political divisions over the country's future role in defense. The legislation is not a return to full conscription, at least not yet, but it opens a path that could eventually transform both Germany's armed forces and the expectations placed on young citizens. As demonstrations spread across the country, the Bundestag's decision has become one of the most consequential national conversations in years. The German parliament's approval introduces mandatory screening for all 18-year-old men beginning on January 1st, marking the first structural step toward expanding military capacity without reinstating conscription outright. The screening involves collecting detailed information on health, skills, motivation, and potential suitability for military roles. Although participation in military service is nominally voluntary under the new system, the assessments will be compulsory, creating a hybrid structure that some critics argue resembles conscription in practice, if not in name. The Defense Minister, Boris Pistorius, argued that the model is designed to determine whether voluntary recruitment can meet strategic needs. He told lawmakers that if the system fails to draw sufficient numbers, Parliament would have to reconsider compulsory service. The ministry's long-term objective is to increase the total strength of Germany's defense forces to 460,000 personnel. 460,000 personnel consisting of 260,000 active duty soldiers and 200,000 reservists. These goals are ambitious when compared to the current figures. Germany presently has around 182,000 active soldiers and nearly 50,000 reservists, meaning Berlin aims to nearly triple its reserve forces and add close to 80,000 professional troops. As the Bundestag debated the new legislation, thousands of students across 90 towns and cities walked out of their classrooms in coordinated school strike demonstrations. Modeled partly on climate strike movements and using similar mobilization tactics, the protests included participants as young as 14. Education authorities warned that the walkouts could negatively affect final grades, particularly for students close to graduation. Still, turnout remained significant, indicating widespread anxiety about future military expectations. During the debate, members of parliament worked to reassure the public that the plan did not immediately impose compulsory service. Siemtje Möller, representing the Social Democratic Party, said that claims about imminent mass conscription or forced deployment abroad were unfounded. She urged young Germans to distinguish between political messaging and misinformation circulating on social media. Her comments reflect growing concern among officials that public rejection of military service is rising faster than recruitment numbers. Yet some analysts suggest interest in the Bundeswehr is recovering, driven by geopolitical changes after the Russian invasion of Ukraine and heightened threats to European borders. Germany's last conscription system, implemented in 1956, was suspended in 2011 under the government of Angela Merkel. At the time, policymakers believed conventional ground force mobilization was becoming obsolete. The Bundeswehr shifted toward a professional model optimized for peacekeeping missions, crisis response, and participation in NATO operations. The new legislation signals a reassessment of that decision. Defense Minister Pistorius framed the return to a structured service model as an essential step toward ensuring Germany can defend itself and contribute meaningfully to NATO commitments. He emphasized that partner nations are watching Germany's response to the evolving security landscape, and many expect stronger engagement from Europe's largest economy. The law passed by a margin of 323 votes to 272, with one abstention. Opposition came from both ends of the political spectrum, including the far-right Alternative for Deutschland and the far-left Die Linke. Members of Die Linke criticized the legislation as only superficially voluntary because the initial questionnaire is mandatory. Party representative Desiree Bakker argued that compelling teenagers to provide sensitive personal information about their abilities and health could be used to pressure them into enlistment. She also highlighted the inconsistency between ministers' reassurances and their reluctance to confirm whether they would support conscription for their own children. Meanwhile, AFD defense spokesperson Rudiger Lucassen dismissed efforts to attract volunteers through higher pay and additional benefits such as subsidized driver's licenses and language courses. He argued that such incentives may lead recruits to prioritize financial gain over patriotic service. He contended that soldiers should be motivated by national identity, not financial rewards, an argument that critics say fails to account for Germany's historical responsibility to avoid militaristic nationalism. Lukassen's comments triggered strong reactions, particularly from historians and politicians who warned against invoking nationalist sentiment without acknowledging Germany's wartime legacy. Discussions about military service in Germany are uniquely complex due to the crimes committed under the Nazi regime, during which the armed forces played a central role. This context has shaped decades of post-war pacifism and public skepticism toward large-scale militarization. The renewed debate over service obligations comes as Germany is revising its long-standing assumption that military force would be needed primarily abroad, rather than in defense of Europe itself. Russia's war in Ukraine has dramatically altered this strategic mindset. The vote occurred on the same day as another contentious reform, the overhaul of the national pension system. Although unrelated to military policy, the pension bill stirred additional tensions within the Chancellor's own party. The law will maintain state pensions at 48% of average wages until 2031, a policy that critics say will strain younger generations as demographic changes reduce the number of working-age citizens. The vote was extremely close, prompting the government to persuade ill legislators and even MPs with infants to attend. Ultimately, the reform passed 319 to 225, with 53 abstentions after a last-minute promise to establish a commission examining long-term pension restructuring. The pension bill includes incentives encouraging older workers to stay employed beyond retirement age to address Germany's severe labor shortages. With the new military service model now approved, Germany enters a transitional period. The mandatory screening system will begin in just months, followed by a comprehensive evaluation of how many young citizens choose to enlist. If recruitment targets fall short, lawmakers will be required to debate a reinstated form of conscription, an outcome that remains politically explosive. For now, the legislation represents a symbolic and practical shift. Germany is re-entering an era where national defense requires broader societal participation, even if that participation stops short of compulsory service. The debate has only begun, and the outcome could redefine Germany's identity, its youth's expectations, and its role in Europe's security architecture for decades to come.